It is 6:18 in the morning on a Tuesday in March, and the parking lot outside a telehealth billing complex on the eastern edge of Tampa is completely still. No lights on inside, no cars arriving yet. The office opens at 8. At 6:19, that stillness ends. 4 black SUVs roll in from 3 directions simultaneously. A Bearcat G 3-armored vehicle blocks the service entrance. 14 agents in tactical gear, FBI and HHS-OIG insignia across their backs, stack up at the glass front doors, a secondary stairwell, a loading corridor, and the fire exit on the building's north face. Someone keys a radio. One word comes back: execute. The glass doors go first. Not broken, breached. A mechanical ram hits the magnetic lock frame at exactly 6:19 and 40 seconds. The entry team moves in fast and low, flashlights cutting through the lobby dark, voices calling clear as they push toward the interior. Simultaneously, agents at 3 other points hit their doors within a 4-second window of each other. Within 90 seconds, the lobby, the main server room, a secondary data closet, and a records vault are all under federal control. Nobody runs, nobody reaches for a phone. There is no one here yet to do either. What agents find instead, stacked in labeled bankers' boxes across the length of a climate-controlled vault, are billing records, thousands of them. Claims filed against Medicare and private insurers for patients who never came in, for procedures that never happened, submitted under the identities of 96,000 people who had no idea their medical histories were being used as raw material for a fraud network billing over $200 million. The case that brought 14 agents through those doors at 6:19 a.m. did not begin with a tip. It did not begin with a confession, a cartel connection, or a wiretap. It began with a number, one specific number, repeated so many times it became invisible to every automated system in the federal payment infrastructure, until a single analyst at the Treasury Department noticed it had never once changed. That number was $4,317.62. How one analyst's instinct about a figure small enough to clear every filter for 3 years unraveled a $214 million healthcare fraud empire. This is that story. The Financial Crimes Unit inside the Treasury Department's Office of Intelligence and Analysis processes millions of transaction flags each week. The volume is deliberate design. Automated systems set to catch outliers, amounts above specific thresholds, patterns that diverge from statistical norms. The system is optimized to catch what's unusual. What it is not optimized to catch is what never changes. In the second week of February, a senior analyst, we'll call her Carver, was running a routine audit cross-reference between Medicare reimbursement disbursements and a watch list of Shell-connected financial accounts flagged by FinCEN the previous quarter. Standard work, the kind of work that produces mostly dead ends. But one data cluster in the Medicare disbursement feed stopped her, not because the amounts were large. They weren't. Each individual transaction was $4,317.62, below the $5,000 threshold that would have triggered an enhanced review, below the $10,000 threshold that triggers a currency transaction report, small enough to be unremarkable on its own. Except Carver was looking at the same number 312 times across an 18-month window, routed through accounts tied to a cluster of telehealth billing entities all registered within the same 6-month period in Hillsborough County, Florida. 312 identical reimbursements, not approximately the same, not rounded to the same figure, precisely, exactly $4,317.62 every single time. I spent hours going through the replication analysis she filed that February morning, and one detail kept pulling at me. The 62 cents. That's the tell. Round fraud rounds. Sophisticated fraud approximates. This fraud was locked to a specific figure because the billing code combination that generated it was hard-coded into their software, and nobody had ever looked closely enough at the amount itself to notice it hadn't moved in 3 years. Carver flagged the cluster and sent a referral packet to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit in Tampa within 4 hours of making the observation. The Tampa field office assigned the case to Special Agent in Charge David Reyes and a 4-agent financial crimes team the following Monday morning. That was the beginning. What's most surprising about this case isn't that the fraud went undetected for 3 years. It's that the system it exploited was specifically designed to block exactly this kind of scheme, and the fraudsters had understood its logic better than most compliance officers. Medicare's automated claim review uses what's called an anomaly detection threshold. Claims that fall within statistically normal ranges for a given procedure code get fast-tracked for payment. Claims above those ranges get flagged for manual review. The billing operation at the center of this case had done something methodical. They reverse-engineered the fast-track parameters for a specific cluster of telehealth procedure codes, then set their software to generate claims that would land inside those parameters every single time. $4,317.62 was not an arbitrary number. It was a calculated ceiling. The maximum reimbursable amount for a particular combination of telehealth consultation codes that would auto-approve without secondary audit. By filing at exactly that amount, never over it, they had built an invisible flaw under a massive fraud operation. For 3 years, the system treated that number as proof of legitimacy. It never varied. Consistent billing looks like accurate billing from inside an automated review queue. The algorithm saw predictability and read it as compliance. What the algorithm couldn't see, what only a human analyst reviewing a wide enough data window would ever notice, was that the number's consistency was itself the anomaly. Agent Reyes and his team formally opened what would become Operation Clean Ledger in the 3rd week of February. Their first task was not a raid and not a wiretap. It was paper. Reyes submitted subpoenas for 18 months of billing records across 7 telehealth entities, all registered to addresses in the Tampa metro area, all showing up in Carver's referral cluster. He also subpoenaed the financial records of 11 LLC accounts that had received disbursements linked to those entities, and a dozen individual names listed as medical directors, billing administrators, and corporate officers. The subpoenas came back over a 3-week period. What they revealed was a corporate structure built specifically to diffuse liability. At the center of the network sat a company we'll call MedTrac Billing Solutions, a telehealth practice management firm registered in Delaware with operational offices in Tampa. MedTrac was not a provider. It was a back-office processor. It contracted with what appeared to be a dozen independent telehealth clinics, handling their billing, their claim submission, and their insurance credentialing. What the clinics didn't know, or at least what several of them would later claim they didn't know, was that MedTrac was also fabricating claims on their behalf. Hundreds of them, thousands of them. Using patient identity data purchased from a separate breach broker operating through a server farm in Eastern Europe. The patient identities were real. The patients were not. The consultations billed under their names had never occurred. The prescriptions attached to those billing claims had never been written. But because the identity data included genuine insurance membership numbers, date of birth verification, and in some cases partial medical history, the claims cleared pre-authorization review at an extraordinary rate. Obstacle number 1 came in early March, about 3 weeks into the subpoena review. 2 of the 11 financial accounts Reyes had flagged went dormant overnight. No outgoing wires, no new transactions, nothing moving. One of the medical directors listed on MedTrac's corporate filings, a doctor, Harlan Voss, submitted a change of address form to the Florida Department of Health. He was relocating to Arizona. They weren't running. Not yet. But someone in the network was aware enough to be cautious, and Reyes needed to know whether that someone had been tipped about the subpoenas. The answer came from a source Reyes had cultivated inside the healthcare billing industry over a previous white-collar case, a consultant who had briefly worked with one of the clinics contracting through MedTrac. According to that contact, word had circulated in the company's internal messaging system that a Medicare compliance audit was underway. Routine language, the kind of thing large billing operations use to signal internal caution without explicitly alerting anyone. Reyes read it as standard defensive noise, not a specific tip about the federal investigation. He accelerated the timeline. By mid-April, the financial crimes team had mapped the full billing architecture, traced disbursement flows through 6 layers of LLC accounts, and identified what they believed were the 3 primary operators running MedTrac's fraudulent claims infrastructure. One individual, referred to in case documents as the coordinator, appeared to control the relationship with the identity data supplier. A second managed the billing software. A third handled the financial disbursements, moving money from the MedTrac operating accounts through a series of pass-through entities before consolidating it in accounts held at 2 separate regional banks. At this point, the case had the shape of the network and the movement of its money. What it didn't have yet was real-time visibility into the operation. Reyes applied for a wire on the back-office administrative line at MedTrac's Tampa office. The application required a sealed affidavit running 63 pages, documenting the billing anomaly, the subpoena findings, the financial flow analysis, and probable cause linking each named target to the specific fraudulent transactions. A federal magistrate in the Middle District of Florida reviewed the application and signed the wire order on April 22nd. The wire went live April 23rd at 9:14 a.m. Here's what this tells us about how healthcare fraud operates at scale. The internal language is completely mundane. The calls Reyes' team monitored over the first 2 weeks of The Wire sounded like any billing company. Discussions about claim processing timelines, complaints about insurer response rates, scheduling logistics. The criminal architecture was so deeply embedded in the operational routine that it had its own professional vocabulary. High-value submissions, priority code clusters, legacy patient files. Terms that sounded like industry jargon and functioned as operational code. One call in the first week was particularly valuable. The coordinator spoke with what appeared to be a data supplier, referencing a delivery of what he called 2,000 clean records. 2,000 new patient identities, presumably acquired through breach data, ready to be inserted into the billing pipeline. The coordinator referenced a specific price per record and a wire transfer amount that Reyes cross-referenced against a known account the following morning. The funds had already moved. The investigation now had a supplier relationship, a transaction record, and a timeline for when new fraudulent claims would likely begin appearing in the Medicare system. Reyes brought in HHS-OIG, the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Health and Human Services. As a formal co-case agency, HHS-OIG brought 2 additional investigators and access to Medicare's internal claim review architecture, which allowed the team to track in real time which claims tied to MedTrac's known billing codes were flowing through the system and being paid out. The numbers were significant. During the 12 days following the wire's activation, the team logged 11 new claim submissions that matched the $4,317.62 signature. 11 submissions in 12 days, each one paid within 72 hours, each disbursement routed into a monitored account. The fraud was still running, and the team now had eyes on it in real time. The undercover phase began in the first week of May. Special Agent Marcus Webb, an HHS-OIG investigator with a background in healthcare administration and a decade of undercover experience, was introduced into the network as a freelance medical coding contractor. The cover identity was built over 2 weeks: a professional LinkedIn profile, a verifiable coding certification, references from 2 fictional prior clients whose contact information routed to monitored numbers, and a realistic portfolio of sample work. Webb's introduction to MedTrac came through the same consulting contact Reyes had used in March. The contact knew someone at one of MedTrac's affiliated clinics who needed a short-term coding consultant to handle a backlog of telehealth claims. Webb was recommended. He was vetted, lightly as it turned out, and brought in for a contract engagement beginning May 9th. Put yourself in Webb's position for a moment. He's inside a working billing office. Legitimate staff around him, most of whom have no idea their employer is filing fraudulent claims. His job is to appear to work, to build rapport with the people who do know, and to document what he sees, without triggering the kind of scrutiny that would end the investigation before Reyes had the full picture. Webb worked inside MedTrac's Tampa office for 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, he documented the physical location of 3 server rooms where patient billing data was stored. He identified the access protocols for the records vault. He established a working relationship with the billing software administrator, a man referred to in case documents as the tech lead, and through that relationship confirmed how the fixed claim amount was generated programmatically inside the billing platform. The tech lead, it turned out, was proud of the system. He described it to Webb over lunch in the 2nd week of May as the most airtight reimbursement architecture in the industry. The system filed at the highest approvable amount for every code cluster. It never varied. It was, he said, designed to be invisible. Webb also identified something Reyes had not anticipated: a secondary billing stream running entirely separately from MedTrac's main platform. Where the primary system filed telehealth consultation claims, the secondary stream filed durable medical equipment claims, braces, monitors, portable devices, under the same stolen patient identities, through a completely separate set of provider credentials obtained fraudulently. 2 parallel fraud operations running simultaneously through the same patient data, under different provider identities, filed through different systems, each structured to stay below detection thresholds independently. When Reyes reviewed Webb's debrief on the secondary stream, he revised the total estimated fraudulent billings upward by $60 million. The case had just grown substantially larger. He also had a problem. Obstacle 2 arrived on the morning of June 3rd. Webb reported that the tech lead had asked him casually to produce a copy of his coding certification for HR files. It was routine language, but Webb flagged it immediately. His cover certification was verifiable through a monitored system, but the request meant someone was doing a closer administrative review than expected. Reyes pulled Webb out of the building that afternoon. Not dramatically, Webb submitted a fabricated personal emergency that required him to work remotely for a week. But the week stretched into 2, and then into a managed wind-down of his engagement. Too much contact with the back-office staff was now a risk. The physical presence phase was over. But Webb had given the team what it needed: server room locations, vault access procedures, a full map of the building's interior, the identity of the key operators, and documentation of the secondary billing stream. Reyes now had enough to build the arrest and search warrant package. Here's the take that'll probably generate some pushback. The system failed these 96,000 identity theft victims years before the fraud started. Every one of their records was available for purchase on breach data markets because previous healthcare data breaches, separate incidents, separate companies, had never been prosecuted aggressively enough to disrupt the supply chain. The fraud MedTrac ran was not innovative. It was opportunistic. The identity data it used was cheap, abundant, and easily acquired precisely because data breach accountability in the healthcare sector has historically been treated as a compliance issue rather than a criminal supply chain problem. The billing operation was the visible offense. The environment that made it possible was years in the making. What do you think? Did the system fail these victims before the first fraudulent claim was ever filed, or was this a failure of real-time detection that should have caught the pattern far sooner? That's a genuine question, and we'd genuinely like to know where you land on it. Through July and August, the investigation team, now expanded to include a forensic accountant from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and 2 additional HHS-OIG analysts, worked through the full billing record archive produced by the Subpoenas. They mapped every claim, every disbursement, every pass-through entity in the financial chain. The final tally was larger than the original referral had suggested. Across all entities connected to the MedTrac billing network, investigators documented fraudulent claims totaling $214 million filed over 37 months. Of that total, approximately $146 million had already been paid out by Medicare and private insurers by the time the wire went live. The remaining $68 million was in various stages of claims processing. The financial tracing work identified 9 accounts across 2 regional banks and 1 international correspondent account that held traceable proceeds from the fraud. The total balance across those 9 accounts at the time the freeze orders were applied was $61 million. The warrant package for Operation Clean Ledger's final phase went to a federal magistrate on February 28th. Search warrants for MedTrac's main office, its data center in an industrial park 6 miles east, 2 affiliated clinic locations, and the residential addresses of 3 primary targets were signed February 29th. Arrest warrants for 47 named individuals were signed the same day. Obstacle 3 arrived with 48 hours remaining. The data center address on record for MedTrac's server infrastructure was 18 months out of date. A routine corporate records check had listed the original location, but when FBI technical agents did a drive-by assessment 2 days before the scheduled operation, they found different company signage on the building. MedTrac had quietly relocated its data center 7 months earlier without updating its state registration. Finding the actual data center location in under 48 hours required cross-referencing MedTrac's internet service provider account records, obtained through an emergency subpoena, with power utility records for the Hillsborough County area. 2 buildings matched the profile. Surveillance confirmed the correct one by 7 p.m. the evening before the operation. The entry teams were briefed on the updated location at 10 p.m. that night, March 14th, 3:47 a.m. 14 agents, 4 entry teams, 1 Bearcat G, 3 4-marked Tampa Police perimeter vehicles staged 3 blocks out. The primary entry team, 6 agents, FBI SWAT element, led by Agent Reyes, staged at the glass front entrance of MedTrac's main billing office. Secondary teams held the stairwell, the loading corridor, and the north fire exit. A separate 5-agent team from HHS-OIG and FBI staged simultaneously at the data center location 6 miles east. Final radio check at 6:17 and 40 seconds. At 6:18 a.m., Reyes's voice came over the tactical channel. Execute! The mechanical ram hit the lobby doorframe at 6:18 and 57 seconds. The door opened in 1 strike. The entry team moved through the lobby in 2 columns. 4 agents pushing to the main server room, 2 holding the lobby stairwell. Voices overlapping on channel calling positions clear. The server room door required a second entry tool, a hydraulic spreader, because the door was reinforced steel rather than the standard commercial door listed on the building schematics. 12 seconds of delay. Agents held the hallway on both sides. The door opened at 6, 19, and 22 seconds, 3 server racks, 2 NAS arrays, 1 uninterruptible power supply unit still running, all intact. The records vault was secured at 6:19 and 48 seconds. The banker's boxes inside, rows of them labeled by quarter, by billing code cluster, by account number, were left untouched for the evidence team arriving behind the entry agents. At the data center, the second team executed their entry at 6:19 and 3 seconds. 2 server rooms and a network operations area, all secured within 90 seconds. No resistance, no personnel present. 7 server racks tagged for forensic imaging. By 7:04 a.m., all 4 entry points were secured, all 3 server locations were under federal control, and the simultaneous arrest teams were moving on residential addresses across the Tampa metro area. The first arrest was made at 6:22 a.m., the coordinator at his home in Brandon. He was still in bed. The tech lead was arrested at 6:31 at an apartment in Ybor City. By 9:15 a.m., 31 of the 47 indicted individuals were in federal custody. The remaining 16 were arrested over the following 72 hours through a combination of voluntary surrenders coordinated by defense attorneys and U.S. Marshals warrants executed in 4 states: Florida, Georgia, Arizona, and Texas. All 47 indicted individuals were in custody by the end of the week. The indictment filed in the Middle District of Florida ran 112 pages. The charges against the primary defendants included healthcare fraud conspiracy under 18 U.S.C. Section 1347, aggravated identity theft under 18 U.S.C. Section 1028A, money laundering under 18 U.S.C. Section 1956, and conspiracy to defraud the United States under 18 U.S.C. Section 371. The wire fraud charges carried maximum sentences of 20 years per count. The aggravated identity theft counts carried mandatory minimums of 2 years consecutive, meaning any conviction on those counts added 2 years on top of whatever the healthcare fraud sentence imposed. For the 3 primary operators identified as organizers of the scheme, prosecutors filed sentencing enhancement requests under the healthcare fraud sentencing guidelines that, if granted, would push recommended sentences into the range of 15 to 22 years. The data seized from the server rooms and the records vault was processed by the FBI's Cyber Division forensic team over a period of 6 weeks. What they found on those drives extended the case in directions the original referral hadn't anticipated. The billing software, the platform that generated the $4,317.62 figure with such mechanical precision, was not custom-built. It was a commercially available medical billing platform that had been modified at the code level to generate fixed claim amounts regardless of the underlying consultation data. The modification was clean and specific. Someone with genuine software development skill had made the alteration deliberately, precisely, and with an understanding of how automated claim review systems evaluated billing consistency. One detail that stuck with me in the forensic analysis: the code modification was dated. A timestamp in the source control records showed the fixed amount parameter had been introduced on a specific date 27 months before Carver noticed the pattern. For 27 months, the software had been quietly generating the same number over and over. And for 27 months, that consistency had read as normalcy to every system designed to catch fraud. The forensic team also recovered deleted records showing the supplier relationship for the stolen identity data. The network had purchased approximately 114,000 patient identity records over the 37-month operation, paying an average of $12 per record through cryptocurrency transfers routed through a mixer service. Roughly 96,000 of those records had been used in filed claims. The remainder were staged for future use. The identity victims, the 96,000 people whose names, insurance numbers, and medical histories had been used without their knowledge, were notified through a joint HHS and FBI notification process beginning 2 weeks after the arrests. Credit monitoring services were extended to all identified victims. 19 of them had already discovered fraudulent medical claims on their insurance records. The majority had no idea. Some of them had been receiving explanation of benefits letters from their insurers for months, describing consultations and equipment they'd never requested. Several had called their insurers to report what they assumed were billing errors. The claims had been marked as resolved each time because the billing data checked out against their actual records. The fraud had been hiding in the documentation that should have exposed it. $61 million across 9 accounts was frozen within 24 hours of the arrests. Asset forfeiture proceedings were initiated against 3 residential properties, 2 commercial vehicles, and investment account holdings identified during the financial tracing phase. The total asset recovery is expected to reach approximately $74 million after forfeiture proceedings conclude, leaving a gap of roughly $72 million in paid-out fraudulent claims that had already been dispersed or spent. That gap represents money that Medicare, meaning federal taxpayers, will not recover. We'll say what most won't on this. $72 million in unrecoverable fraudulent Medicare disbursements from a single operation that ran for 37 months is a systemic failure that goes beyond the individuals who designed the scheme. The detection gap existed because the analytical tools Medicare uses to identify billing anomalies are calibrated to catch what looks unusual, not what looks too consistent. That calibration hasn't changed. Right now, there are likely other fixed-amount billing operations running against Medicare's payment infrastructure, hitting the same procedural ceiling over and over, reading as clean because they never vary. The investigation caught one operation. The methodology is available to anyone who understands how the review thresholds work. Comment yes if you think Medicare's anomaly detection systems will be updated in the next 5 years to catch this kind of fixed-amount pattern. Or no, if you think the structural incentives make meaningful reform unlikely. We read every one. The 47 individuals indicted in Operation Clean Ledger faced a combined exposure of over 400 years in potential federal sentencing. The corporate entities were dissolved by court order, the data center servers were wiped and their hardware surrendered. The billing software modification was documented, reported to the commercial platform's developer, and patched in an update pushed to all licensees within 60 days of the forensic findings being shared with the company. We track what comes next. Subscribe to the Bureau files so the next case finds you first. The thing is, the number $4,317.62 exists nowhere in federal regulatory code. It was not a threshold set by Medicare. It was not a standard reimbursement amount published in any fee schedule. It was an internal calculation made by whoever designed the fraud, a number small enough to avoid scrutiny, large enough to generate meaningful volume, and precise enough to become invisible through sheer repetition. 3 years, 312 times per month on average across the network's peak billing period. 96,000 people's identities used without their knowledge. $214 million billed. And the thing that brought it all down was that the number never changed. Not once. Not by a cent. Not for 37 months. One analyst looked at a spreadsheet and asked why a reimbursement amount had been exactly the same hundreds of times in a row. And the answer to that question unraveled everything. The case file for Operation Clean Ledger contains exactly 312 evidence exhibits. The first exhibit listed is a single-page spreadsheet printout, 9 columns wide, with 312 rows, each one showing a transaction date, an account number, and a dollar amount. Every row reads the same, $4,317.62. How many numbers like that are sitting in systems right now? Identical, repeating, perfectly consistent, waiting for someone to ask why they never change?